Hi everyone, my name is Tracy Babbage and I am the Children's Ministry Director here at Isle of Faith United Methodist Church. This is our Child Youth Protection Policy training. It is important that we adhere to the policies and continue to train to provide the best protection for our children and youth. Here at Isle of Faith, we believe in implementing a policy and adopting procedures to protect our children, and it recognizes that our Christian faith calls us to offer both hospitality and protection to the children and youth. The social principles of the United Methodist Church states that children must be protected from economic, physical, and sexual exploitation and abuse. Tragically, churches have not always been safe places for children. Child sexual abuse and exploitation occur in churches, both large and small, urban and rural. The problem cuts across all economic, cultural, and racial lines. God calls us to make our churches safe places, protecting children and other vulnerable persons from abuse. The first thing we want to do is define what a child and youth are according to these policies. Following the model of the public school system, a child is under the age of 12 years. A youth is anyone at least 12 years of age but not yet 18 years old, or anyone 18 years old or older who is still attending high school. An adult is anyone 18 years of age or older or who has finished high school. So if you're still in high school and you are 18 years old, you are still considered a child and youth, and we want to work together as a team to ensure the safety of those children and youth. Next, I'd like to take some time and define what church personnel is. For the purposes of the Child Youth Protection Policy, church personnel are defined as a paid staff person, which is anyone employed by the church, including all appointed or supply clergy and all other staff on the payroll of the church. So if you receive a check, you are a paid staff person. An adult volunteer is any adult not paid by the church who serves in any position involving the supervision or custody of minors, including volunteers in the nursery, daycare, school, Sunday school, VBS, drivers, and chaperones. Adult volunteers who are not screened must be supervised by a screened adult or screened adult paid staff person. So let me talk about that for a second. If you are in a position where you're serving children and youth more than 3 times a year, you either one, need to be screened yourself or serve with a screened adult. A screened adult is a volunteer or paid staff person who has undergone the church's screening process. A screened adult does not need to be a church member, but must have been a regular attendee and active participant in the church for at least 6 months prior to undergoing the screening process. So if you are new to our church and you're interested in getting involved with our children and youth, we can help you do that after 6 months of being with us. Not included in the definition of church personnel are youth helpers or youth staff. Youth helpers below the age of 18 or 18 or older and still in high school may assist in activities involving children and youth, but must be supervised by at least one screened adult at all times. This goes along with the unscreened adult volunteers. Regardless of your age, if you are not a screened adult and you are supervising a child, meaning you have the child or youth without the parents there, then you will need to be with a screened adult. We will not have any unscreened adult with the children and youth. The next category is working around children, and we've kind of already gone over that a little bit, but if you intend on supervising children or youth for more than 3 times throughout the year, then you will need to become screened. The next category that we need to go over is the definition of abuse. There are several different kinds of abuse, and it's important to know the differences. For the purposes of this policy, child-youth abuse includes physical abuse, which is violent, non-accidental contact which results in injury. This includes, but is not limited to, striking, biting, or shaking. Injuries include bruises, fractures, cuts, and burns. The next is sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is any form of sexual activity with a child or youth, whether at the church, at home, or any other setting. The abuser may be an adult, an adolescent, or another minor. And in a little bit, we'll discuss the bathroom policy, where a lot of sexual abuse can take place minor to minor. So we want to be mindful of that. The next type of abuse is emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is a pattern of intentional conduct which crushes a child's youth's spirit or attacks his or her self-worth through rejection, threats, terrorizing, isolating, and belittling. This is a very common form of abuse, and when children and youth come to Isle of Faith United Methodist Church, we want to make that spirit grow, help that self-worth grow. We want to be here for them to have emotional stability in who they are in serving Christ. So the last form of abuse is neglect. A lot of children are facing neglect in this day and time. So we want to kind of keep an eye out and make sure that our children and youth are not being neglected. So the definition for neglect is failure to provide for a child or youth's basic needs, or failure to protect a child or youth from harm. So when a child is not being fed properly, does not have proper shelter, or is in an environmentally hazardous environment, then they are receiving a form of child abuse, which is neglect. So it is up to our congregation to help these families out and support them, especially when they come to church. The next thing we need to cover is the policies and procedures that we have on reporting child abuse. If there is suspicion of child abuse, we want to secure the safety and anonymity of the child first. Do not confront the accused. Please do not prejudge the situation. Note all statements and information forming the basis of the suspected abuse and neglect. So at the time that you suspect abuse or neglect, you need to start writing that down and have documentation of that suspicion. You will then go immediately and directly to an IOFKids staff member or director, myself. And then the IOFKids staff member will immediately notify the pastor, who may, if advisable under the circumstances, contact the police to prevent any additional or imminent harm to the child's physical or emotional well-being. IOFUMC will contact legal counsel for guidance, and by law, it is the responsibility of the person observing the suspected abuse and neglect to make the report. So that is another reason why we want to inform staff and the pastor, so we can do this with you. We do not expect you to do anything on your own. However, if you are a screened adult, then we are mandated by law as child abuse reporters. So please consider your desire to serve with that in mind, that you are a mandated reporter when we screen you. And if necessary, we will contact 911 if it is life-threatening. So that takes us through the policies and procedures on child abuse. And the reason we have them is to protect our children and youth. The children and youth come here to learn and grow about Christ. And if they are scared because of abuse, then we're not serving them the best that we can through our church. So the next thing we want to talk about are the symptoms that we notice for child abuse, or things to be on the lookout for. The physical symptoms of abuse can be lacerations, bruises, and or swollen areas or marks on a child's body, irritation, pain, or injury in the genital area, difficulty with urination, discomfort when sitting, torn or bloody underclothing, and a venereal disease. Some behavioral symptoms that you might notice: anxiety when approaching church or nursery area, nervousness or hostile behavior towards adults, sexual self-conscious, acting out of sexual behaviors, and withdrawal from friends and activities. These are just some common symptoms that you can be on the lookout for. I know a lot of other situations in our lives create the same types of symptoms, so it's very important to make that documentation as we discussed and report it to the staff and pastor of the church. So the next thing we want to talk about is a check-in policy to ensure that the children are being supervised in an appropriate way, and the types of classrooms that we have. It is important to keep a classroom door open, or if it is shut, it needs to have a window that is visible to other people. We always want to have anyone younger than second grade to have a check-in policy. We do this through 5th grade, that we check them in, and only the adult on file is allowed to pick them back up. We will not release the children to anyone else. We are fortunate that we are a small family environment, so we are able to really build the relationships with the family and children and give the support that they need to continue their journey and grow their faith in Christ. We always want to make sure there's at least 2 screened adults that are unrelated. That's not always what is able to happen, but that is our goal. We will always have 1 screened adult with each room. At Isle of Faith, we want to continue to support the growth and nurture the confidence and self-worth of the children and youth. And a lot of that has to do with how we as adults interact with the children here and youth. So it's important that when you come and serve, that you are energetic and happy that they're here, and you let them know that they are safe under your care. We do have some important tips and suggestions on how to create that kind of environment for our children and youth in our behavior policy. There are also some guidelines on how we want to discipline and utilize the bathroom. I'll go over a few of those with you now. As far as the bathroom policy goes, we always want to make sure that it is in plain view while protecting the privacy of the child or youth. For instance, if a child needs help pulling their pants back up after using the restroom, you want to prop the door open with your body while protecting the view of the other children and adults from seeing their person, and continue to help them pull their pants back up. So this allows everyone to see that no harm or abuse is happening. And that is in our downstairs nursery area. Upstairs, the bathroom is down the hall. So we either want to make sure that 3 youth are going together, or the bathroom door is open and 1 supervised adult is there in the hallway to observe no harm is happening. This allows the people in the classroom to still see you, and it allows you to make sure the child is safe while using the restroom. These are very important. This is where most of the abuse can and will happen. So we really want to make sure that the child and youth is protected while using the restroom. We never want to send 2 children to the restroom alone. Always make sure it's 3. The reason not 2 is because there is a lot of minor on minor child sexual abuse, so we need to protect that. So the next thing I want to talk about is a goal that we have here at IOFKids, and it is to provide an environment where we connect with God and grow together in Christ. And none of that can happen in a chaotic, unsafe environment. We teach children that they are safe and well cared for when we provide an environment that is consistent and trustworthy. So the next category that I want to talk to you about is the behavior policy as far as consequences and how we model that behavior. The first thing we want to do is the child will be verbally or non-verbally corrected and reminded in a loving manner when behavior disrupts classroom activities and ministry. The second consequence will be the child will be pulled aside for a private conversation and prayer in view of other people, just off to the side so you still have your privacy to communicate about the behavior. If the behavior continues to persist, that we will notify the parent in the service, and they will need to come to the child's classroom immediately and have a discussion and prayer with their own child. And if the child continues to persist behaviorally, then we will ask them to leave for today and come back next Sunday. If a child causes physical harm in any way to another child in their classroom, the parents will be notified, and we will be expected to leave immediately, and we will try again next Sunday. So when we do summon a parent from service, we want to discuss the situation and the behavior with the parent, not attacking the child, but attacking the behavior, and not even attacking. It's very important to know that corporal punishment is never allowed, and what we want to strive for is redirecting the behavior and loving and nurturing the child through Christ. Many times through behavioral challenges, there is a need that a child is not receiving, and it's up to us to help provide that need and identify that need. I've added an extra video down below that is a trust-based relational intervention. It goes to show how we can identify behaviors and check on certain things to make sure these things aren't creating the behavior. So I do encourage you to watch that. It's a short 6-minute video that helps you look at behavior from a different perspective and allow you to have the grace to handle it in a loving, nurturing way. So the next thing I want to talk about is how we speak with parents in a situation that you need to inform them about. Think about the plans God has for each child and family and our commitment as a church. Let this be a guide to effectively communicate with parents. We want to be gracious, tactful, loving, and mindful of tone and facial expressions. We want to give helpful information and be honest when it's necessary. Some things are only worth sharing if the parent asks explicitly. If a child was tired or irritable, it's probably not helpful to tell the parent at pickup. Instead, focus on what was learned or something that happened that day. We learned about. We got to play. If a child is defiant or disruptive, it is necessary to share this with the parent. We had difficulty listening to following the teacher's directions. We had difficulty respecting our friends. We had difficulty learning today. This allows us to focus on the behavior and not the child. Many times when you focus on the child, it makes a parent become defensive, and we're not helping in that way. So we want to focus on the behavior. And then we also want to, if we need to, give specific examples when a child has been defiant or disruptive. Go over our behavior policy and the things that we're doing to redirect that behavior. And explain that in the future that they may be called to talk or sit with their child, or if it continues that they may be dismissed from the class for that day. So do not portray that you were frustrated. Do not attach emotion or advice when you're speaking to a parent, or that the behavior is related to the child's character. We want to remember that we exist to love and support families, and our tone and the way we approach any situation is either going to show that love and support or not. So we have to be mindful about how we discuss behaviors. The next topic we want to talk about is interpersonal boundaries. There are two different perspectives when it comes to interpersonal boundaries. One is a person respecting, allowing for the boundaries of others, and the other is a person being aware and protecting of their own personal boundaries. We all have certain boundaries that we are susceptible to, and we need to be mindful of the boundaries that others have and mindful of our own. This helps you to be safe to do the job and allows the child to feel safe while you do your job. So it's very important to know what your personal boundaries are and what those of the child and youth we are serving are. This concludes our Child Youth Protection Policy training. I do ask that you watch the 6-minute video about trust-based relational intervention. There is a forms tab that you can click. There is a description of each form prior to the forms. Please look at those, fill out the necessary forms, and you can email them back to me or drop them off at the office. There's also a copy of the training policy that I just discussed and our behavior policy that you can look at. And there's also a quiz at the bottom that you'll need to take in order to get credit for taking this training. So I hope you have a blessed day, and thanks for taking the training.